Hi, this is Randal Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Simon Phipps joins me. We're going to be talking about Aquameta again. It's a great way to build a full web stack using just Postgres. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randal Schwartz and Simon Phipps. Episode 527, recorded April 24th, 2019. Aquameta Revisited. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I'm your host, Randal Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week, or as often as I can. It's been almost every week. Movers, shakers, the big projects, little projects you may be using every day, and not aware of it, projects you may want to play with right after this show. I think today is going to be one of those. Joining me once again is my lovely and talented co-host, Simon Phipps. Simon, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Randall. It's a pleasure to be back. And as you can see, I'm live in the Twit studio with a beautiful audience of young, really clever people from Italy.
Yeah,
there they are. Give everyone a wave.
There we go. Okay, yes, we'll get back to them towards the end of the show, but I want to get into the show as quick as we can. Today's guest is a returning guest, Eric Hanson. Originally talked to us a couple years ago about I think it's a couple years ago, but a year and a half ago, about Aquameta, and he said I've made some improvements. I'm at a new release level, and I'd like to come back on and talk some more about the directions I've had, the observations I've made, and things like that. So I said, Eric, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So what his project is that he's been working furiously on for quite a while now is it's called Aquameta. And as I've been reading the description right off the webpage here, it's a web development environment where instead of storing code as flat files in the file system, everything is stored in Postgres as relational data, including source code, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, images, and other resources, system configurations, database schemas, permissions, and more. And it has a web-based IDE, which is really beautiful, by the way. I was watching the demo for this. It can be used to build web applications and much more. Now, that's a curious thing. I wonder what else you build besides web applications, so I'll have to check that out. What do you know about this so far, Simon?
I know nothing whatsoever about it apart from what's in my briefing notes.
Okay.
Although listening to that description, it reminds me a lot of platforms that were common in the 1980s and 1990s. You know how they say that every platform eventually turns into a mail program? And
yes.
This is the eternal destiny of PostgreSQL, is to turn into a mail program, and this is presumably one of the evolutionary stages where it begins to lose the dorsal fins and grow legs. So I'm going to be interested to look and see whether that is indeed part of the evolutionary cycle of Postgres into an email system.
Sure.
When I was at Unisys, we used to have a thing called Link, which was a database that had turned into an app development platform, and it was supposed to be the last program anyone would ever need. And around about that time, there was also one called The Last One, which was, again, somebody writing the last program they'll ever need by storing all of the attributes in a database. So I'm looking at wondering if it's deja vu.
And I thought Excel was supposed to be that. The last thing you ever need. You put everything in a spreadsheet. That'd work fine, right?
There were a whole lot of people who programmed it that way and are now actively regretting all those macros existing in their lives.
Yes. And for those of you that are watching the video, there's me again. I am home again, which is a bit unusual. I'm typically here only like 1 week a month. I had a particularly long travel day on Monday, and I haven't fully recovered from that. So I probably picked up some sort of stomach bug. And so I haven't slept well the last couple of nights. So if I look a little groggier than usual, that's what's going on. I'm just not having a happy day quite today. And so hopefully I got enough sleep to be able to pull this show off. And since this is sort of a redux where we're actually revisiting something we've seen before, that shouldn't be too tough. Well, so yeah, I'm calling from home. You're at the Twit headquarters, and let's go ahead and bring on Eric. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and where are you speaking to us from? It looks different from the last time you were on.
Yeah, I'm in Minot, North Dakota.
All righty. Let me wave
I got a
in
bunch
your
of family
general
back
direction.
here. Thank you.
I'm waving. At least I think I'm waving
east.
in your direction. Yeah, right.
East, yeah.
Yeah, that way's east. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it is definitely east. So you asked to be back on the show because you've been making some progress with Aquameta, but let's just pretend that people haven't watched the first show. So we're going to talk about this from scratch. So
Sure.
give us the give us the 30,000 foot view. When somebody's reaching for Aquameta, eventually, when it gets done, because it's not quite done yet, what problem are they trying to solve?
Well, they're for the very there's lots of ways to answer that because it's kind of a platform with broad goals. But the simplest thing to say is they're trying to build a web application and do so fairly quickly and do so without having to learn too much, learn anything unnecessary.
So when we last talked, I should stop saying when we last talked because, like I said, we're trying to presume this is a standalone show. Aquameta is essentially everything rolled into a Postgres database. So rather than having a file system access, well, it has file system access, but rather than having some of your CSS and JavaScript be stored in the file system, it's actually stored as rows in a database. How did this project get started? What made you think of trying to do something like this?
Well, yeah, I've been developing web applications since PHP 3, actually before that, which is like the late 90s. And the more I learned about databases and the more I came to appreciate what they're capable of, I saw a big hole in how we're developing web applications, what would be called the modern way of doing things, although I wouldn't call it that. And how it could be a lot simpler, and that is centrally around a layer of what you might call unnecessary complexity, things that the database is really, really good at that we end up coding over and over, and shifting things to the database makes the whole process both of learning and developing and sharing and reusing quite a bit simpler.
Well, if this is going to be a web server, what is a listing on port 80 or 8080 or whatever to let Postgres do that? Because I don't think Postgres has built-in HTTP, right?
Yeah, right. So it's all built in Postgres. So we actually, the first time we programmed this, we implemented it as a background worker, which is in Postgres. So it essentially bolts on a web server to Postgres, but the enemy being the perfect being the enemy of the good, we just kind of gave up on that and put Nginx on the front. But it's a very minimalist layer that actually calls off to a Postgres function called request, in which you pass the HTTP verb, be it a post or a get or a put or a patch, and your URI and any header arguments, and then it hands those off to Postgres as quick as possible, and then Postgres handles it from there.
So all the mapping that normally happens is a feature, say, in Apache 2 or Nginx and stuff like that. That mapping from the URIs is actually Postgres code then?
Yeah, that's right. So there's as you might expect in a datafied approach, there is a resources table, which contains just static HTML resources. This might be like your index.html, but there's also a templates and a template routes table, which can do dynamic mapping. Any request that's passed in that matches this regex, kick off to this template and pass it the variables that were passed in. So yeah, that's all done in SQL and PLPG SQL.
And you just said datafied. Maybe you want to expand on that.
Sure, yeah. So datafied. So your audience is probably made up both of kind of philosophers and people who just want to get on with their life and use a cool piece of technology, and I'll kind of address both. So to those who like talking about information theory, what we are really good at in computer science supposedly is identifying apt abstractions, aka problems that all look the same, and pulling in a solution that addresses all of them. And when I look at our web stack, I see a lot of different problems that look all the same, and that's namely that there's a whole lot of structure there. There's throughout the different layers of the stack, there's all these different structures, and the apt abstraction is that we're reading from them, we're writing to them. We want them to be relationally constrained, although we're not using relational constraints. We want the data to stay in a valid state, and all that stuff to me when I look under the hood of a web programming stack, looks like something that a database could be really good at. And so this datafication approach is to take all the different layers of the stack and reimagine them and kind of take the structure that's already there and import it into the database and put everything in Postgres so that you gain a pretty exponential increase in simplicity and reusability and maintainability and all that stuff.
Is Postgres fast enough for this? I know they've been making it faster and faster over the decades, but can you actually get a reasonable web performance on like a multi-core machine? Yeah,
absolutely. And there's two ways to answer that. One is just yes, it is quite fast. But two is that the more intelligence you bring, so serving straight from the database, even normal approaches to web development don't do that all the time. They use a caching layer, and we've been experimenting quite a bit with caching and cache invalidation using the database. And as it turns out, the more intelligence you have in the database, the more intelligent caching you can do as well. Whenever you do an update to a particular table, you can invalidate that cache in a very, very precise way. And as such, only things that need to hit the database do so. And as it turns out, 90% of a web page is not something that's dynamic. It's something that was the same the last time you loaded it or the same the last time somebody else loaded it. So putting more intelligence into the system through this datafication approach makes the system potentially quite a bit faster because of caching as well. But Postgres is screaming fast. It's crazy fast. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was fast. I remember we had a guy on a couple of years ago that was able to build a wire protocol MongoDB emulator and translate it using Java to use Postgres as the back end, and it was something like 3 times as performant as a stock MongoDB. That was pretty funny. Is that even going through a data translator layer, it still was actually faster. So the static assets, like the JavaScript probably doesn't change between hits. The CSS probably doesn't change between hits. But do you also have a templating language in the HTML?
Yeah. We're using, and it's so I'm kind of trying to separate what we take a strong opinion about versus what is something that we just needed to pick to get a job done. But we chose this is an opinion, we chose the .js layer, or templating language, which is just a simple JavaScript templating language, and that can run both server side and client side to render templates. What Django might call a partial, or there's all these different terminologies out there, but yeah, it's got templating.
Wow, and that's all written in PGSQL?
No, that's in JavaScript. So we've pulled in V8, which is, as you probably know, the JavaScript engine that runs under Chrome. And Postgres has a PLV8 engine underneath it that allows you to write functions in JavaScript and then run them on the server side as a Postgres procedure. And so to do the parsing, we pull in PLV8 and create a PLV8 language function called, template render, I think it's called, and then include that JavaScript library just like we do on the client side, and then render it using the same code base, but run on the server.
And are you using any other PL languages like PL Perl?
Not using PL Perl currently, although there's no reason why somebody, if they wanted to write some Perl functions, couldn't. It's as you might know, PGSQL is not the most elegant or fun to write things in language.
Yeah,
to say the least, but it's really fast, and so we wrote the core of this thing in that largely. But there's Postgres supports. We are doing some PL Python, PLV8. There's a Java. There's I think a PHP and a Rails or Ruby and a Perl and a TCL, and it's kind of language agnostic in terms of what language you pick on the server side to choose for writing a function.
So I was really impressed by I was looking at the various core extensions, including Meta, where you're putting a wrapper around the system tables, which didn't have the kinds of features that you wanted. But what I found most fascinating is that you created views such that when you insert or update or delete on this Meta layer, it translates that into the right, is it DDL? Let's see, DDL, I can't remember the acronym.
Yeah, that's right. Data definition layer. Yeah, that's right. What did you like about it?
Well, it was really cool that because I've written a lot of triggers and stuff. I'm a big Postgres fan as well. So, but the thing I hated about views is that every time something changes underneath, you have to go through and do a lot of extra work to get the 3 different things: insert, update, and delete correct. Would just using the meta extension actually help me to do my own databases?
So this building on this first principle of datafication, one of the things that actually needed to be datafied was the data itself, or the database itself, which, as you know, it's the DDL versus the DML, data definition language versus data manipulation language, are totally different things. And so if you want to create a table, you have to use this alternate syntax that says create table, blah, columns, blah, blah, blah. And the way that I would like this thing to work, and the way that it does work, is to be able to just insert a table into one of these views using the DML, and have it underneath the hood with a trigger do a DDL operation. So in terms of eliminating complexity, now you can do most DDL operations using just insert, update, and delete.
And I saw one of the things on the meta description that says delete from meta, semicolon, would probably not be something you'd want to do. Can I guess that would just delete everything you have?
Yeah, meta.schema. Delete from meta.schema would destroy your whole database. Yeah, single command.
Always do that in a begin.
It's powerful. If you want to do that, then that's the way to do it.
So what's the end goal here? Is this just an exploratory thing for you, or are you actually building projects with it for clients? Do you have a community around this so far?
There's a few dedicated zealots who have drank of the Kool-Aid and use it a bit, but not a ton. It's a fairly small community, but I'm using it for all my projects. It hasn't been until now. I think the 0.2 release will be the first time I'll say this is ready for users. And I wanted to get some documentation in there first before we release the 0.2 release, but it's right there. The user interface is the most advanced in terms of like how much different stuff it can do in terms of like the different layers of the stack. It can do version control and handles that layer of the. It can do your template layer and handles that layer of the stack. It can do. It's going to be able to do schema definition and that kind of thing and handle your database layer of the stack, and then pushing and pulling and that kind of thing. It'll pretty much be able to do. The goal is to have it be single interface that allows you to do everything in the stack and do it actually well. Have it not be a toy, but have it be able to produce a robust user application. And right now I use it for all my projects, except for that I go underneath the hood and use the console and do stuff all the time. And bringing that stuff to the UI is where we're at right now. And it's coming. The last month has been. He's seen dramatic changes in the user interface. It's a long ways. It's a long ways towards being a full-blown web dev IDE. Yeah.
Right. Now, I noticed that you've licensed it under GPL v3. Why did you pick that license?
Great question. Because I didn't really know a lot. I think is like the best answer. I'm not a lawyer, and I thought, it works great for Linux, and Linux doesn't even use the GPL3. So it's going to change. I thought in the early stages there's a lot of technology here that I didn't want people to just run with and not contribute the source code back. Ideally, I think eventually we'll get to like an MIT style license, but early stages, like if you're gonna make some changes to this thing, it'd be great to just have the code back since it's in kind of a open collaborative development environment is what I'd like to see happen with it. But long term, we'll probably just go MIT or Postgres license or something fully permissive. So
I mean, Postgres is under a completely non-reciprocal license. So how does the Postgres community feel about all this? Because this is licensed in a way that quite a lot of them are going to feel is anathemic, one might say.
They haven't even, the Postgres community hasn't really seen too much of it. I mean, I posted things up to the updates, but like license thing, not a lot of thought was put into it, honestly, and I just thought, I don't know, works great for Linux, which they don't even use it, and so it was probably a mistake, and I'll put it under something fully permissive in the next one,
Right. There's some decent licenses out there. I recommend a license called BSD plus patent that's being written by McCoy Smith. And is just like the BSD license, but also has got a full patent protection for all the participants in your community, like you get from Apache. So that's well worth looking at, and it's compatible with GPL. So if anyone started using GPL, they'll be able to carry on doing so.
Okay, cool.
So I saw one other large contributor to the project on the GitHub statistics. Is that it? Is it you and one other person? Is it you alone?
It's that's probably Mickey, and he used to work for me, and he's still working on it quite a bit, but he's kind of gone down he's working for a node shop right now and is really doing a lot of R&D on trying to improve our the way we handle some of the JavaScript side of things, which a lot of this code is like 5 years old, but he's doing his own experiments and might come back with something that's better than what we have right now, in which case we'd happily pull it in. But we went open source a few years ago, but before that there were some major contributors as well, all that worked for me, but so far not so much from the open source community. It's pretty much just me these days.
Right. So this is all being funded by your business activity, or is there some other funding model?
It's I do consulting on the side, rapid prototype developing. If anybody out there needs a rapid prototype, we can crank out applications. I'm going to start Twitch streaming and doing some of it, because the shenanigans we get up to with this thing are, I think, pretty fun to watch and pretty impressive in terms of the kind of results you can turn out pretty quickly and that kind of thing.
I'll be interested to see how you get on with Twitch streaming as a revenue model for software development. I can see it in gaming, but I'm less convinced that programming is really at the heart of their model.
Yeah. I really don't think it is. I go into they have a category in there somewhere deep in the bowels of their category system is a programming category, and there's like 6 or 8 people in there, and not a lot of web development, a lot of game development. So I don't know that much about Twitch. I just built a couple apps to kind of manage my Twitch stream and show the project that I'm working on and integrate my development with my stream. And they're all super alpha right now, but I haven't actually done any streaming yet, right. And I don't know about Twitch. If you know about a better platform, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I have to say our studio audience did laugh a little at the idea of programming being on a Twitch stream. So they're all at least 3 generations younger than me over there. So
yeah, but that's because it's so boring right now to watch people program. It's not,
you've got to see the cut and the thrust of it, haven't you? Yeah.
Using modern day tools, I don't know. It takes a long time to code, and if we could, like the idea is that we'll be able to code stuff up quick enough that it might actually be interesting to watch, which would be an accomplishment.
So talking of the cut and thrust, so you said you had a former employee who's now working on Node. How do you feel about Node and NPM? They're a pretty strong flavor, and I would imagine you've probably got a view about them.
Well, what they've accomplished, given their humble beginnings, is quite impressive. Web development before Node has always had this modularity and packaging problem, and I wouldn't say they solved it, but they definitely made some giant steps. I was just watching their founders' 10 Things I Regret About Node and talk, and it was compelling. I'm not a huge Node developer, just because this project, I think we've got a much better concept of modularity that isn't limited to a single layer in the stack. I mean, when you look at our concept of modularity in the industry in terms of like reusable components, it's bifurcated into all these different layers, and layer being like, okay, the JavaScript layer, right? And then within that layer, into different packaging systems. Now there's Node and Yarn and Parcel and who knows what else just within that one modular system. And I think that there's a limitation in that approach, in that you've got modularity within a single layer, but like combining multiple layers in the stack is quite a bit more difficult. And then we reach to solutions like Docker, which say that, basically we failed at modularity, and the only way to have something modular is to use an entire new stack for each process, which, God bless them for finding a solution to a really hard problem. But what's different about ours is that the language of data is ubiquitous. It has, in the application domain, we've gone into countless different database or domains and say, oh, we can put that in a relational database, no problem, And what we haven't done is kind of turn that back on ourselves and use the language of data to bring coherence to programming itself. And so with Aquameta, yes, you'll be able to bundle up JavaScript packages and are able to bundle them up, but you can also combine them with database schema and data and images and assets and cron jobs and Nginx configuration and all this kind of thing, and say this is a bundle that has a vertical swath to it that most packaging systems, as far as I know, no packaging system other than kind of the Dockers of the world can compete with. So
yeah, that sounds like that's getting into the chef sort of scope rather than just the individual application. So that raises immediately in my mind a question about dependencies, because I mean the big challenge of any packaging system ultimately is dependency management. Is that something that you're good at in Aquameta?
We're good at it, and I'm learning a lot from Node. I really hadn't I checked out from it, but watching this talk, I'm spacing on his name right now, but the founder, he pointed out that, and my buddy Mickey, who's in that world as well, who works on the project, pointed out that one of the big problems is the single global namespace. That a package can only there's one global namespace, and you can only have one package with the same name. Underneath the hood of Aquameta, bundles are all just their primary key is a unique identifier, so we can have bundles with the same name if we're so inclined. The second problem with dependencies is that you can't check out two versions of the same package at the same time. At least a lot of packaging systems suffer from that, and Node doesn't. You can have multiple versions of the package and reference a dependency at the same version at the same time. With Aquameta, that's fairly trivial, and we've got some innovation in that area still to do. But what it's going to allow you to do is reference a dependency at a particular version, and so you'll be able to install all the versions at the same time if you're so inclined. And have all your dependencies be guaranteed to be static, because commit history never changes. It's a immutable thing that is the same way as it was the last time you looked at it, guaranteed. So we're going to be quite robust at dependency management. Yeah.
So how do you work in a team on something like this? Do you have something, it looks like you've got something that says version control system similar to Git. Is that something that could talk to a server then and allow you to publish changes to other members of your team?
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you did that?
Yeah, totally. So the version control system is literally like pretty much all the concepts are ganked from Git terminology. But instead of versioning files in the file system, it versions rows in the database, and so a commit is a snapshot of a selected set of rows. Okay, so do you want me to go through the concepts here? Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So
a database can contain a whole bunch of different rows, right? Let's say you've got an existing project and you just drop this, it's called bundle. You drop this bundle version control system into it, and now it's there. So the first distinction is between rows that are tracked, called tracked rows, and untracked rows. And tracked rows are rows that are within the scope of some bundle that's installed on the system, aka they're version controlled. And then untracked rows is the the chaos, the teeming horde outside version control, and because the list of untracked rows is really useful. Sometimes something will pop up in there that you say, oh, I created this row and it actually belongs in the package. So you want to keep your untracked rows fairly short, that list. And so if you got an existing database, then you would first, when you install it, set up your ignore rules that say, okay, ignore everything in this schema entirely, or ignore everything in this table entirely, or you can say ignore this row specifically. But once you ignore it, the version control system will never look at it. And then what's left is all the tracked rows. And the tracked row, there's only three, when you boil it down atomically, there's only three kind of changes that ever happen in a database. And that's that a row is created, a row is deleted, or a field is modified. Those are the only three things that can ever happen in a database in terms of data. Now there's all the schema stuff, but like underneath the hood, when you delete 20 rows at a time, we break that down into, okay, those are 20 different deletes of 20 different rows. And so once you track some rows, you can stage them. And the stage is just like it is in Git. It's what the next commit is going to look like, which is all the previous commits plus any changes you've made to the working copy. You stage those, you commit them, you add a commit message just like you do in Git. You can push and pull them from remote databases, which happens over the Postgres FDW is a foreign data wrapper that takes another Postgres database, connects to it, and makes it look like a database locally. So you can push and pull these databases or these rows all back and forth, and fork and branch and all this kind of thing. Merge is coming; it's really close, but the cool thing is it's all handled through a GUI, so you can do it from underneath the hood. But also there's a web interface for doing it, which makes changes quite a bit easier. Adding new origins and remotes and this kind of thing. You can export bundles to a file system and save them. If you want it. When this thing is completed, there'll be like a kind of a GitHub for it where you can push up your changes to GitHub, but you can also just export a bundle to the file system and then restore it later if you want to. But as far as I know, it's a full-blown version control system that lets you do versioning on the database.
How do you deal with two different databases then that are using the same bundle on separate instances, having conflicting changes? So like if one of them updates a field, but the other one updates the field to a different value, how do you deal with resolving that?
Yeah, so changes made to two databases simultaneously both go into their respective commits, their next commit. And then just like in Git, you would have, so the commit tree is called a commit tree because it's not a single line. Like if I'm just a lone developer, I'm working on a commit and then I make another one, then I make another one, then I make another one. But in a collaborative environment, that's not how things work, obviously. So it's a commit tree, and then you've got two different commits that kind of have a branch point or a branch point, and then a bunch of commits at the end of each of those branches. And to bring it back together, you have to merge them together, which means that any changes that were made to one and not the other, you just pull those in. Any changes that were made to the other and not the one, you pull those in. But any place where both rows were modified, you have to do a merge resolution, and that has to be done by hand. There's no silver bullet there other than just like look at them and pick the one that you want.
Cool. This is really fascinating. But we're only at 0.2. All right. So. Yeah. When did you think this will be 1.0? Do you have any timeline worked out for it?
Well, my sense of perfectionism is really getting the best of me to some extent. You really like we could have launched something and called it a 1.0 quite a while ago, because at various stages this thing has had a user interface and was quite usable and that kind of thing. But I'm really afraid to attract people who are expecting to build things with it and have it not change, because I keep finding things that need to be better. And if you fire something like this, I mean, Node, the Node guy, geez, I should remember his name. Anyway, he was saying, Node will never overcome these problems. There's way too much momentum. way too many decisions that changing this would break everything that everybody else has done. And so I want to get it as right as I can before we do something that like attracts a lot of users, but it's getting really close. There's almost nothing in it that I don't like anymore. And so I'm suspicious that like 0.3 will be a pretty major refactor, and then we'll just jump to 1.0 to catch all the things that I know need to be different. But there's most layers in this thing have been designed at least twice, if not 3 times. The version control system's been, this is our third and completely different implementation of that. The meta catalogs, we worked on those so hard to get it to the point where like, okay, we got this right. Anybody have any changes we want to make about this? Nope. Okay, cool. We got it right. And so I don't know, 6 months maybe to a 1.0, but right now it's to the point where like it's usable by early adopters. I use it myself. If you know Postgres, you can pick it up and use it, and I think you'd have a pretty good experience.
So Digmax in our chat room says Randal is the name you're looking for. So I wanted to make sure
that you don't
walk away confused. Yes. Thank you, chat room. Thank you, chat room. That always helps for us. So I'm still looking at. I want to talk a little bit more about web technologies too. So do you have data binding between visible widgets and database fields?
Yeah, there's an event layer that uses Postgres Notify, and so you can attach triggers to a. So typically, when a widget is on the screen, it's there because it mirrors a row in the database, and so we have this thing called widget.sync that says, okay, given this SQL query, or this what we would call a datum statement, but underneath the hood, it's a SQL query that returns all these different rows. Sync that up to these widgets, and it's just a mapping between rows and widgets. And then the event listener listens to changes on that table that would affect the row set, and then propagates those up to the widget, so that it makes a new widget or modifies the contents of an existing widget or whatever. And we bind the two together. That's in a state of flux right now. Tackling events and rethinking that layer is going to be a major thrust of 0.3. But it's definitely in the mix, and it's ongoing, the work on it.
So this is clearly an ambitious project. You're obviously spending your nights and weekends working on this and trying to make a day job out of it from time to time. What's the biggest surprise you've had from getting started?
Biggest surprise, I mean, this is going to sound kind of silly, but that it actually worked and how well it worked, and the benefits that you get. Like, it started as a very experimental project, and we got a little ways into it, and like kept noticing benefits that were unanticipated. Like this whole version control system and the packaging. We didn't set out to build a meta modular packaging system that spans all the layers. That was not a goal that was even on the list. It just turned out that by organizing around the first principle of putting everything in the database, building something like that was close to trivial. I mean, we almost got it for free. The other day I'm working on this little application that allows you to it tracks Wikipedia page views. So Wikipedia publishes their page view data once an hour, and it's really cool. You pull it down and process it with Postgres, and that's all really cool. But so I put the processing in a bundle, and then I made a user interface for it and put that in a bundle. But the one thing that was missing is the cron job, the thing that says, okay, once an hour we need to go out and add that. And I was like, how in the hell am I going to get this in the database? And so I asked on the Postgres channel, is there anything out there that'll run periodic jobs, but within the database? And they're like, oh yeah, check out PG cron. And I said, oh geez, well that's a great name for it, And so I pulled in that project just by Citus data, and what it is it's a cron system in the database, yet another Postgres extension that lets you schedule tasks and run them, and what is being run is a SQL query. And so to us, SQL queries, you open up the whole world, and so that allows us to run this function that goes out and grabs this data down from Wikipedia and pulls it in and processes it once an hour. And so I staged a cron job. I added the row, which is a job. In the cron.job table, I added the row to version control, and then committed it to the repository. And then next time I check this thing out, boom, you got a cron job. And like, there's no way in the world we ever would have anticipated like a benefit like that from our humble beginnings of, well, maybe we could put widgets in the database. It was not on our radar at all. But Postgres talks to so much different stuff, and like, there's all these different extensions, and it's surprising me how cool it is and that it actually works.
Any chance of porting this to MySQL at some point? No.
Maybe. I don't know. Question. They're coming along. They're further along than they were, but no, I don't know. I haven't kept up with how well they're keeping up with Postgres that much, just because I'm fully invested in this one. But probably not. No, I don't think so.
Right. And we did have a question from the chat room earlier. Blockchain, you can add blockchain to this somewhere?
Great question. So one of my favorite ideas is a Bitcoin foreign data wrapper, in which you make transactions by running SQL queries, and the mapping there is quite stunningly good in terms of the mapping between the language of data and anything else is stunningly good in my estimation. But just like everything else, Bitcoin can be modeled relationally. There are transactions, and there are wallet addresses and all this kind of stuff. And there's already languages in, say, Python for accessing and manipulating the blockchain. And so you can write a Postgres foreign data wrapper that reaches out to the Python API. We don't have to reinvent all this stuff. Just use the API as it is, and then you've got a datafied blockchain. It would be trivial to do that and fun. It'd be a heck of a project. And then you could build a user interface that manipulates the blockchain very trivially as well. It's like the time to realizing a user interface that does really powerful features underneath the hood is faster than anything I've ever seen. So heck, why not? Somebody should do it. Postgres foreign data wrapper, a blockchain foreign data wrapper.
Exactly. We're almost out of time. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to make sure our audience is aware of before we have to let you go?
Oh, I'd love for people to try this thing out and let me know what they think of it. And there's an IRC channel, the Aquameta pound IRC on Freenode. Hop in there if you have any questions or wanna tell me I'm crazy or debate philosophy or just problems with using the system and things that we might be able to make better or things that don't work for you. I'd love to hear all that. So hop on in there and tell me what you think.
How about two-way email binding? Can you send mail from it yet? And can you receive mail?
Yeah. I did hear your lead-up question. And yes, we have made Postgres an email. It can send email. It can't receive email yet, but there's an email table, and you insert into the email table a to and a from and a subject and a message, and underneath the hood it reaches out and with triggers sends the email off to the SMTP server. You can have multiple SMTP servers configured and tell it which one you want, and that's how we send the auth registration for signing up to be a user on this thing. So yes.
Wow. Cool. All right. Well, like I said, we're out of time. We started a little late, so that's why the show's a little bit shorter than it normally is. Sorry, guys, for people listening at home. But we had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we figured it out eventually so we could actually have a show happen. So, Eric, thanks for coming back on the show. When you hit 1.0, I'd love to bring you back on and tell me what else you had to add.
Okay. Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
All right. That was Eric Hanson, abusing Postgres in a brand new way. What do you think there, Simon?
Well, I was very pleased to hear that he's almost got it to the stage of being a full email client, and it all sounds interesting and promising. It sounds like just the sort of tool that comes out of a consulting business, and I think it's quite promising. I think he's going to have a couple of challenges. One of them is that he's already aware of is backward compatibility between versions once he goes 1.0. And the second one, I think, is going to be managing dependencies as he pulls in capabilities from outside a particular stack to enhance a web app that he's building. So I think he's going to have to really struggle with those two things. But I think it looks very promising. And I look forward to the third show when he comes back and shows off what he actually built.
Yeah, yeah, and there's in the show notes we do have a wonderful demo that he did. It's about 15 minutes long, and he's really eating his own dog food. I mean, it's you can actually he actually made the claim that you can debug the debugger while in the debugger. And I thought, wow, that is just way cool. So go check that video out. So we're running over here, so I got to get down to the upcoming guests. Cyclone DX is next week. And that's a lightweight software bill of material specification. So you can look at your upline, uplink, upchain, source project, whatever you call those things. Your upstream, there we go, and do analysis based on what people are saying their upstreams are. Following that week is Teleport and Gravity. So that show's actually going to be at a very special time, a very special FLOSS Weekly. We're going to be at May 9th. That's a Thursday. At 2 p.m. in the afternoon. We're getting preempted by the Twit Network for some big event that's happening on Wednesday, so I got bumped. But that's okay. We did find a guest that could do that time. Now it's going to be fun finding a co-host because all my European co-hosts, that's going to be way too late in the day. So hopefully someone will step forward from around here. Teleport is a privileged access management for elastic infrastructure, and Gravity is an opinionated snapshot-based Kubernetes packaging and management tools. Following that, RavenDB, which is a NoSQL document database. Barrios Backup, I think I saw these guys at Scale, is a 100% open source fork of a backup project from Bacula.org, and the fork is in development since the late 2010, and it has a lot of new features. We're going to get a representative from the IBM Cloud Platform coming on, hopefully not just a sales guy, but hopefully somebody has some technical background. That's a full stack cloud platform that spans public, private, and hybrid environments. But so basically it's there's a layer in Cloud Foundry that lets you port things amongst all three of those kind of environments, and IBM's, of course, supporting it for a commercial hire project. But we'll talk a lot about what Cloud Foundry is actually all about because of his influence and knowledge. CryptPad is a private, by design, popular alternative to popular Office tools and cloud services. All the content stored on CryptPad is encrypted before being sent, so that's really cool. We've got Redis coming back on after having been away for a couple of years. It's an open source, BSD licensed, in-memory data structure store, another NoSQL database, I guess. Lots of things, so that's cool. That's all I want to say about all those. You can go to the big spreadsheet linked from the homepage for the show, twitch.tv/FLOSS, to get dates and times, and also figure out who else we're working with and for. I've been getting some tweets that people want to talk to me, so hopefully we can get some more people on there. I've got a list of about 10 projects from Cloud Foundry that I also want to bring on the show, so it's just a matter of me sending out the right email. We have live stream normally at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays at live.twit.tv. We took a couple of questions from there. Thanks for the feedback and comments, guys. You can follow us on @FLOSSWeekly on Twitter, or me at Merlin on Twitter, MERLYN. We used to have Google+, but Google+ went away. I'm sorry about that. I was just at Cloud Foundry. We talked to some potential guests. I'm probably going to be at the Perl Conference in Pittsburgh in mid-June. I've just been accepted as press for OSCON in Portland, in my hometown, in mid-July, so that'll be fun. So if you're at any of those conferences, well, if you're at the Perl Conference or at OSCON, definitely say hi to me and walk up to me. A lot of people have been doing this at the conferences. They come and go, I watch your show all the time. Very cool. So glad you've been doing that. You want to plug anything there, Simon?
I was very worried that there was no blockchain show coming up, actually, Randall. But so the Open Source Initiative has just had a new board elected, and our new board of directors is meeting for the first time in New York. It's a big change. We have a majority female board of directors for the first time, and we'll be joining in with the Open Source Meetup in NYC. You can find them on meetup.com/opensourceNYC. And I would very much like to invite all of you to come along to our meetup, where we're going to be discussing communities, companies, and careers in open source. And there's a good chance we'll be buying some drinks as well. So do join us. That is on May the 7th in New York City. And the event starts at 6 p.m. at the 566 Fashion Avenue. Do please join us. Apart from that, I'm doing lots of pro bono work. I've just been involved in starting up the Consul Foundation, which is a participative democracy platform. I'm still working with LibreOffice at the Document Foundation. I'll still be on the OSI board for one more year, and I would very much welcome your support on Patreon if you'd like to support my work, because that's my only income stream that's supporting all of these pro bono activities, FLOSS Weekly, and everything else. I think that's everything, Randall.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for being back on the show. And we will we'll see you when you're available again, and obviously not for that one. It's at 2 p.m. That's going to be way too late. It'll be like you have to get up at midnight for that, right? So.
Yeah. Back when I was young, I used to work at those hours, but I'm not young anymore. We should actually just mention the young people who are in the room, because John's turned all the lights up, so the audience would be interested to meet these folk. They're all from Italy, from Trento. They won a hackathon over there, which was about a smart bivouacking application, which we'll try and maybe put that in the show notes so people can look at it, because it's really quite fascinating. And
cool.
They very patiently laughed at all the jokes and been quiet through all the bad bits throughout the show, so thank you.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the studio, guys. But we're out of time, so we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.